You're listening to The Hurt Locker, the podcast that opens the door on men's mental health. And tonight, a little twist on proceedings. We have from Prostate UK Cancer Charity CEO Keith Morgan. Keith, welcome to The Hurt Locker.
Thank you very much, Yinka. I'm going to have to give you my official title because otherwise my CEO is going to have my is going to have my guts regardless. So it's very kind of you. You've promoted me, but I'm the associate director of Black Health Equity at Prostate Cancer UK. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. So I was pleasantly surprised when I saw your face. I had seen it before, but when I saw your face then, I thought, yes. So tell me, how long have you been in the role?
I've been here 6 months now, coming on 7 months, but it's truly been a roller coaster. It's felt a lot longer than that. You may notice that I've got a bit of a gruff voice, and it's because I'm recovering from we were at the Mobos, so we were the official charity partner for the Mobos this year. That took place on Tuesday. Obviously, Mobos is a massive cultural institution. It's done amazing work to really help Black artists, especially new Black artists, navigate the whole industry, the whole music industry. And we're a charity that helps men, in my role, particularly Black men, navigate the whole health system around prostate health. So it was great to be the official charity partner this year for them, and just felt like a natural fit because we're both focused on championing Black equity. And so yeah, we were the official charity partner, and we also sponsored their best male artist category for this year, and it was fantastic. We had one of our huge ambassadors for us, Tim Campbell, from The Apprentice.
Yes.
He presented the award for best male artist, which Central C won. And I think he went a bit off script, which was fantastic for us. But he really, because they have the auto cue, but he really, pushed the message for us about Black men's level of risk of prostate cancer, and how important it is to check.
And that's why we've got you on here.
Yeah.
Tell me, before we go into it, what led you to this role of being Associate Director of Black Health Equity?
Yeah, well, equity roles has never been, well, it's something that I've been conscious of having an interest in, but I've always also been conscious of the amount of energy, focus, and resilience it takes really to do a good job in those roles, because effectively you're entering into a predominantly white organization, and you're saying we need to focus on a specific group of the population, which is a small, relatively small part of that population. And every day, your work is around changing behaviors, changing mindsets, getting people to understand the really unique barriers that, in this case, Black men face in, accessing the right level of support, treatment, and care for prostate health. And so I was a bit, if I'm honest, I was a bit hesitant about taking on an equity role, because I know that they can have quite a short lifespan, because you get really exhausted, and it's can be quite draining, always trying to push the agenda. But this one just seemed to, I just got an impression from the way in which they structured the JD, and what the ask was in terms of what character they were looking for, that it wasn't performative, that they were really invested in Black health equity. And then I looked back at some of the work that they had done, and again, I was just really encouraged. Their investment in Black health equity has really evolved over time, to a position where they're ready to be a legitimate advocate for Black health, and for black men. And for me, that was the appeal, really, is being assured or being reassured that they're in it for the, for the long game, and they appreciate the impact that having a black man in this role could have in terms of bridging some of those partnerships, advocating on behalf of black men, being seen as a legitimate advocate. And that's why, being the official partner of the Mobos was such an important moment for us, because there is certain, parts of the black communities that we can't reach because we don't have that, that existing trust and relationship.
Absolutely.
They don't yet see us as an authentic advocate for them. And so
Okay.
that's why it was so important to develop that relationship.
Thank you. Before we continue further, what is a prostate?
So a prostate is a good question. A prostate is it's like a walnut-sized gland that sits in your nether region, and what it does is it helps it's the fluid that the semen travels through. So it's a part of your, I guess, uh, you know, your sexual function, because it's that important part which produces the liquid that the semen travels through. So that's what your prostate is.
Okay. And in relation to that, how do you know without having tests whether it's healthy or not?
It's a really, really important question. Your listeners and will probably, and I had this conversation actually just recently with a couple of fellas we were working with, um, who had lived experience, or their family members had lived experience of prostate cancer. And I immediately said, you probably think you need to have a, a digital rectal examination, which is, basically, having a finger in your back passage to find out if there's something wrong or not. um, Things have changed so much so now that you can have a blood test, and it can test, whether or not there is something to be concerned about in terms of your prostate health. So you don't necessarily now have to have that finger in the back passage, which I know for a lot of men kind of puts them off. So now you can just do a blood test. But early stage prostate cancer, unfortunately, often doesn't have any symptoms at all. So you could have it and not know you have it. And that's why it's so important that we get men, especially men that are at that higher risk of prostate cancer. That's black men, men with a family history of prostate cancer, and for black men, those that are over 45. It's so important that we get them to check their risk. So we've got an online risk check on our website, which is free to use. If you search risk checker prostate cancer, you'll be able to find it. And within 30 seconds, you can find out what level of risk you have, and it will give you advice on what you could do next. So it might encourage you to go and speak to your GP about your concern. You can say, I did this risk checker, and this is what it said about what to do next. So yeah, having that conversation with your GP is so important, because the early you treat it, or the early you catch it, the more likely it is to be cured. And so that's why we really encourage people to do an early check. If you're 45 years old, go, and you're black, or if you have a family history of prostate cancer, go and use the risk checker. Go and have a conversation with your GP about the option of having a PSA blood test. It really could save your life. Don't wait until you have symptoms in order to do that, because it could be too late if you wait until you have symptoms.
How do you get over the challenge, the stigma, the keeping cards close to your chest of black men not talking?
Yeah. I don't think it is reserved for black men, to black men, or for black men. Talking in general is a challenge for all men. When we do research into the barriers that prevent men from um, you know speaking about their prostate health or going to speak to their GP, there's no disparity in number of men, based on their ethnicity. All men seem to find it challenging to talk about it. But what does really help, we found, is that if they have the tools to be able to themselves kind of take ownership, check for themselves, then it does encourage them to have a conversation. So we've got a service. It's a specialist nurse service, and as part of your induction, you sit into some of their calls, and it really is amazing. First, it's amazing to hear how much knowledge our specialist nurses have around all aspects of prostate health. But then secondly, it's just so encouraging to hear the many different things that men want to talk about. So men want to talk about, what does this risk checker mean? I've done it. What does it mean? Men want to talk about, I've got this comment back from the doctors. What does this mean? Or if they get their test results, what does this mean? Or if they have been diagnosed with prostate cancer and then they're on that treatment pathway, they want to talk about that as well. Or, like this podcast is focused around, some men are really struggling with their mental health around it, and that's often,
Absolutely.
that's seldom a subject that is discussed really. We kind of go from, you must get checked, to you're on the treatment, and then that's almost sometimes feels like it's the end of the story, when it really isn't. I've spoken to so many, particularly black men, who are really honest about their experience of being told that they have, um, you know, prostate cancer, irrespective of what stage that is, and the impact that it's had on them mentally. They think about all the various different things that could be, the implications of that. They think about, will they be impotent? They think about, will they be able to, use the toilet without the assistance of a pad, or they so many various different things that, men wouldn't talk about naturally. They talk to the specialist nurses about those things. And we also have support groups that are, um, around the country, men that have been diagnosed with prostate cancer, men that are on the treatment pathway, men that have, come on the other side, have been treated, who have set up support groups and just want to encourage more men to come and speak to them about it. Some of those groups have saved lives. I know that they have saved some people's lives, some men's lives who had seriously considered suicide as a result of being told that they have prostate cancer, or going through the what is sometimes quite a challenging experience of treatment. And so that's, those support groups that we have around the country are so important. And Prostate Cancer UK really does try and support them as much as we can, and an organization called Tackle as well, tries to
Okay.
support them and give them resources that they need.
Okay. It's interesting because in preparation for this, I asked a few of my mates to have a little chat about the prostate, and two of them said yes, we get checked out regularly,
Mm,
and one said no, they've never been checked out. But what was surprising was I'd never had that conversation with them beforehand,
mm,
and
mm.
it's like the conversations are always in isolation.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah,
said, people keep the cards close to the chest, particularly, black men.
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, before I joined Prostate Cancer UK, I used to be in the barber shop, and it would be a conversation that you would hear in the barber shop, because it's funny, right? Because until they have the diagnosis, they talk about it in a very flippant way. That was my experience. But once they have someone close to them that has unfortunately died because of prostate cancer, or they themselves have been diagnosed, they become almost evangelists, and they want to tell the world. They want to tell the
Zealots.
world. Yeah, zealous,
Zealots.
exactly. They want to tell the world, and so in the barbershop that I used to go to in West London, which was intergenerational, we had young guys, old guys going in there, and topic of debate would be health, because black people and their health, they've got strong association with the health message, especially if you're from the church. You've got that health message going on, health and football, obviously. But yeah, when it came to prostate cancer, as I said, there was lots of comments around, in pato as well. I'm not gonna do pato because my mom will kill me. But I'm
I'll
not
go
gonna go
on.
and
I'll
have,
go on.
no, no, not at all. I'm not gonna have a man, do this, put his finger there, and so you have all of these things, and these were, people were hearing this and people laughing about it, and it's a bit of a joke until, as I said, someone comes in that has experienced being diagnosed, or has lost someone, and then they talk really passionately about the need to go and check yourself out. And I was on LinkedIn the other day, and someone posted a video again of someone's a Jamaican guy speaking to another Jamaican guy about going to check out your going to do a PSA blood test, but it was in patois, and it was in the background was this really common reggae beat, and it was just brilliant because it was just really authentic, really direct, funny as well, very funny,
Mm.
but the message was very, very strong. And I think it's more ways in which we can use those types of messages to get to people, and spaces like the barbershops, like community centers, where black men congregate and do talk, that we need to use those spaces to get the message across.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that black men do talk, but the environment needs to be the most appropriate environment for them in order for them to open up, as it were.
Absolutely, absolutely. Once you get them talking, they
They
don't
don't
stop,
stop.
to be honest. Yeah, they don't stop. So we've got a group, it's called the Black Men's Health Advisory Group,
Okay.
who have been instrumental really in helping to drive our Black health equity agenda. And they're effectively, they're a scrutiny group. So we bring, any fresh ideas that we have. At the moment, they're supporting with the development of a Black health equity strategy that we're hoping to launch in July. So anything like that, they have been, pivotal in developing for us. And we have our meetings they're 3-hour meetings, but I can tell you they go on for a lot longer than that, because they want to talk. Once they're in the space and they feel comfortable to talk, they want to talk about how can we reach more black men? How can we get the guidelines changed? That's the other thing I must mention. So, um, 1 in 8 men in the
Good.
UK will get
Good. I wanted
prostate
to
cancer.
talk more about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 1 in 8 men will get prostate cancer in the UK, but that is double for black men. 1 in 4 black men in their lifetime will get prostate cancer. The reasons why are still, we're still doing a lot of research to try and find out why black men are so much more, at risk of getting this. But nevertheless, that is the situation. So 1 in 4 black men will get prostate cancer in their lifetime. And because that level of risk is so high, it also means that they're also twice as likely to die, from prostate cancer. The other thing is that for most men, other ethnicities, their age of risk increases from 50, whereas for black men, it increases when they're 45. So it's 5 years younger than most other ethnicities. And also, black men are more likely to develop aggressive, prostate cancer. And then a report came out just recently, just to further emphasize the disparity and the need to really think about, a targeted screening program for
Okay.
black men and those that have a family history of prostate cancer. Is the National Prostate Cancer Audit released a report in January, which found that, um, black men were being diagnosed at all stages, so including the early stage, which is obviously something to celebrate.
Okay.
But on the flip side, it also meant that they were being diagnosed more at late stages as well, so stage 3 and 4, where it's much more difficult to cure.
Yes.
And then worse still, black men in their 60s were 14% less likely to receive the NICE recommended treatment, so treatment that on the NHS is recommended. Again, why that is, the data doesn't go into the reasons why, but again, it just emphasizes the need for us to really champion the idea of having, or champion the campaign and champion a move towards having targeted screening program for black men, because they have a high risk, and for those that have a family history of prostate cancer. So at the moment we're running, we've been supporting the idea of a targeted campaign. We really welcome the health secretary asking the National Screening Committee to relook at the evidence for screening, and in particular, consider the challenge with equity and prostate health. And then the other thing that we're campaigning on, which doesn't require the National Screening Committee to do any more additional work. This is literally, changing the wording on the guidelines. At the moment, we're in this really, I think, unforgivable position where GPs are prevented from having proactive conversation with men at the highest risk of prostate cancer, because the guidelines, the NHS guidelines, prevent them from doing that. So you said earlier on, how do you know if you've got prostate cancer? And I was saying, well, unfortunately, early stage prostate cancer often doesn't have any symptoms. So the GPs will only have conversations with men that come and present with symptoms. But again, as I said, that means that you're waiting for men to have possibly late stage prostate cancer, which is harder to treat, harder to cure, before you speak to them about the options of having a PSA blood test. So it's an unforgivable position. I think we've got a moral imperative. The government have got a moral imperative to really get these guidelines changed, which can be done, a stroke of a pen, really. So we're campaigning at the moment. We've got a letter on our website, which is addressed to Wes Street in the Health Secretary, asking, desperately to change these guidelines so that we can save more men's lives, especially black men's lives, and men that have a family history of prostate cancer.
Can anybody access that letter and say, as a collective, get people to sign it and submit it to
Yeah,
the Health
anyone can.
Secretary?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone can go on and sign that letter. And yeah, do it now. We don't want to delay any further. We've got this now. It's irrefutable evidence of the disparity that there is for black men. So we've got this evidence now. We've got a strong case. The change can be done tomorrow. And so yeah, please do get on our website, sign the letter, and let's try and get these guidelines changed.
Tim put in the chat about if your mum or sister has a breast cancer, then that's also an indicative risk factor as well.
That's right. Yeah. So again, there's research being done in that area, but yes, there is research that gives evidence or provides data that shows that if your mum or your sister, if there's a family history of breast cancer, of prostate cancer, then it also increases your risk, your level of risk. Absolutely.
How do we, because within the black community, there is issues about trusting the medical profession and overcoming that hurdle. And it feels very much that your role and the role of the Black Health Equity Group and others, it's a bit like Sisyphus pushing that boulder up a hill and all that.
Yeah.
How do you maintain that momentum?
Yeah. I mean, trust is definitely an issue. Trust in terms of going to speak to somebody, but also trust in terms of being part of trials. So clinical trials, for example, we often get quite low representation of black men being involved in those clinical trials, which is obviously so critical in trying to find the best treatment for all men, but in my case, obviously in particular for black men. So, for example, there's a clinical trial at the moment that we've invested in partnership with the government, which is a massive trial. It's called Transform. It's a game changer in terms of the scope of work. So,
where's that occurring?
So that started now. But it's a clinical trial that will probably take 10 years to complete fully. But there's various different phases to it, and we're engaging with through that trial. We'll be engaging with tens of thousands of men. Whereas most trials are very, you get into the thousands, maybe hit the 10,000, but this is tens of thousands. It's massive, but the scope of it is looking at, the most effective way of treating men with prostate cancer. So it's a real game changer, and a significant part of it being a game changer is making sure that we have a very, very high number of black men participating in that trial, in that clinical trial. So again, part of our work is making sure that black men are aware of this trial, and when
Absolutely.
they're invited, that they step forward and participate. It's really important. And I say to anybody that's like, oh well, I'm not sure, what they're going to do with my sample or whatever. What I say is that unfortunately, black men have a really high level of risk of prostate cancer. Surely you want to be at the front of that queue when a treatment that could save your life, or your brother's life, or your uncle's life, or your father's life. Surely you want to be at the front of that queue. If we don't get, black men participate in that clinical trial, then how can we be at that beginning of that queue? So yeah, we that's an active piece of community awareness work that we're doing. But in addition to that, we're activating as many black men as we can across the country. We've got a really fantastic black community awareness team that get involved with all types of events and activities. We've been at Notting Hill Carnival trying to speak to black men and black families. We're planning to do some other stuff on Black in the Square. Black in the Square, I think it's called Black in the Square. The Mobos was a big moment for us, and then other smaller scale community awareness events. We're really been pouring and investing in trying to engage black men and black communities through those.
Thank you so much for that, Keith. I think for me, and I'm going to put my hand up here and say, I've never had a PSA test.
Now's the time, Yinka. Now's the time to go and get it.
This is the start of my journey now. This is the start of my journey. And as I mentioned before, a couple of my mates, one in particular, spoke about, I've known loads of people in our community who've died from it, but it's never highlighted, Can I ask you, if you're in treatment, you're done. It can come back again like any other cancer, yes?
It can, yeah. I mean, every man is different, so how they respond to treatment is going to be different. What treatment is best for them is going to be different. So it's hard to say, definitively what would happen. And that's again, that's why I signal our specialist nurses. That's why it's, if you're not sure, if you're concerned, you can speak to our specialist nurses. You can find their details on our website. But I'm happy to give it here as well, if you don't mind.
No, please do. We're going to put out notes with it, but please just mention it now.
Yeah, so you can speak to, if you're struggling with any aspect of navigating prostate cancer, whether that be feeling anxious about doing a PSA blood test or speaking to your GP, or you've done that, you're waiting for the results, or you've got the results, and now you're either doing active surveillance, so that's doing regular checks, or you're actually moving on to the treatment. You can speak to any of our specialist nurses if you call 0800 074 8383, and you can speak to them, and yeah, they'll be happy to speak to you and help you.
And they're open 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and
They're open,
Wednesdays 10 till
yeah,
5 p.m.
exactly, yeah. So Monday to Friday is 9 till 5, and then Wednesdays 10 till 5. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. There was a question there. Going back to GPs, you mentioned, I think sometimes, again, as part and parcel of a little bit of research for this, some people's experiences have been that reluctance of GPs to step up
Yeah.
for the patient when they come in, when they've got concerns, etc. How do we overcome that? Can we be insistent on that?
So, excuse me, the chair of our Black Men's Health Advisory Group, when I first met him, he said something that stuck with me, and it was, you don't have to, if you're not happy with the conversation that you've had with your GP, or what they've given you in terms of next steps or advice, if you're not happy with the outcome of that conversation, you're not wedded to them. You don't have to stay there.
Absolutely.
You can speak to another GP. You can get a second opinion. So the
Absolutely.
first thing to say is, don't feel just because they've got doctor in front of their name that you can't go somewhere else for a second opinion. Please do it. This is about your own
Absolutely.
health. And the second thing is to say is, it is your health, so you do have to be the CEO of your own health. You do have to, you know, um, do what's right for you. Don't rely on somebody else. And then the third thing is to say is, look, we know of GP practices that have done amazing campaigns to proactively reach Black men. So um, there is I'll shout out the Council Alliance and the Southeast Council Alliance, who have worked with GP practices across Southeast London, and they've done a texting service where they've looked at they've looked at the database of that they have, and they've picked out Black men over a certain age, over 45 years old. They've sent them an official text to say, come in and speak to me about a PSA blood test.
Brilliant.
And they've had really great results, both in terms
Brilliant.
of Black men turning up to do it, and then also, the being diagnosed. Obviously, you don't want to celebrate, a diagnosis of prostate cancer. That's not what you want. But it's good that if you do get them to come, it is good that you spot it, and a lot of them is at early stage as well. So that's even more encouraging. So and I've heard of examples of similar sorts of projects and programs in the West Midlands, of where GP practices have worked with alliances and community organisations to really understand what are the challenges, what are the barriers to getting Black men to come and speak to their GP. Been focusing on trying to address those barriers and those challenges, thinking about language that they use, thinking about the materials, thinking about being in the spaces where Black men are, rather than having to wait for them to come to you. So
Yes.
there are fantastic examples of that happening across the country, but um, it's not going to be consistent because of those guidelines. Until we get those guidelines changed, GPs are in effect beholden to follow those guidelines. In effect, they are being told, don't do it unless a man presents with symptoms. So that's why
Mm.
it's you, I strongly believe, and I know this is not shared with everybody, that especially Black men that have had really terrible experiences of being turned away from their GP practice, and then 2 months later going back and then being diagnosed at late stage. So I've heard some harrowing stories of that happening. However, I do believe that the majority of GPs have their patients, health and well-being at their heart. That they want to do the best by their patients. But those guidelines are hampering them from being able to do that. And so in relation to prostate cancer, and so that's why we're campaigning to get them changed.
Good. And just to underline all of that, people listening there may experience issues with urinating, feeling that their bladder hasn't fully emptied, need to urinate some more than usual, usually at night. So if they experience this, get checked out.
Get checked out. Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Can just the mental health, you alluded to the mental health side and the impact there. You know, is there any, I suppose that's in part, that's what the specialist nurses are there for as well, you know, to not necessarily placate, but understand, empathize with the fears that people
Yeah, I
have.
mean, yeah. Yeah, I mean, many men with both before they get the results back, and if they've been diagnosed, the kind of stages that they might go through is like shock or fear
Yes,
or anger. Then it might
yes,
materialize into denial. Then it might materialize into frustration, disappointment, and stress. And then if they are, faced with the prospect of either, going to, do an MRI scan, then it might be the anxiety or the worries about, if the MRI scan does, bring up an issue that they need to do a biopsy and find out more about. Then there's worries about, well, what are the side effects if I do decide to have treatment? What are the side
yes,
effects? I talked about, erectile dysfunction, um, you know, problems with going to the toilet, so sorry, um, urinary or and bowel problems. So there's all of that wrapped into it. Also, treatment. It can mean that you are off work for a period of time, for long periods of time. Again, if you can't afford to do that, that's an additional worry
yes,
for you. Um, then there's the mood swings that you might have when you're on things like hormone therapy, the anxiety that you will still have. And then lastly, I suppose that feeling of you're on your own, you're doing it
yes,
on your own.
yes,
And that's why the target, that's why the support groups are so important, I think,
absolutely.
to providing you with that confidence that you're not on your own, because you're speaking with men that have probably been through the experiences that you have been through, um, and want to talk to you about those experiences. So that's why those support groups are really important. We do
Absolutely.
also on our website, we've got like a guide, and then specifically about anxiety, like how to deal with anxiety. So we've got a guide which is very tries to speak in language that men recognize, um, to tackle those various different that journey of emotions that I just described that men might face. So you can go on there, but yeah, I think as I said, the support groups are really powerful groups for you to, if you're worried or you're going through those emotions, to access.
Keith Morgan, Associate Director of Black Health Equity for Prostate Cancer UK. Thank you.
It's a
I
pleasure.
have one more question for you, though. Who's the most important person in your life?
Oh, well, you know what? What's funny is that both my mum and my wife are downstairs. I probably could hear this. So, man, you
You
put
can
me in a
only pick
difficult
one.
position. Listen, I spend more time with my wife, so I'm gonna say my wife is the most important person in my life. She's a pillar to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to say you're wrong. I'm going to say the most important person in your life is you.
Yourself. I knew you were gonna say yourself. But as I said, I've got them downstairs, so if I say me, I'll be in trouble. But you're quite right, Yinka. It is yourself, of course.
Keith Morgan, thank you for appearing on The Hurt Locker.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Cheers.